Okay, sorry about the interruptions. Let's continue where we were at. ולכן בעלתני בסוף ימיו בא לבאר כאשר מפשיטן האילומס מעכבה אביה שלמט לבחינס עכבה אביה השרשי נמשך על ידי זה תוספת אור יושר במדרגה גדולה וממילא האור חוזר נעשה בישר סייס. And now we can understand why it is that the Balatanya on his deathbed began to explain to us how the Iker Tikkun of those lowly Kalim that seem to have no Tikkun whatsoever is specifically through the Or Choizer, because in truth, the Shirish of Hasidus is the capacity to be mapshit, the Akva Abiyah from their placement in the writings of the Arizal, to abstract the teachings of the Arizal and bring up those very concepts to their loftier place. And Mamela, the higher you go in terms of the source of the Or Yashar, the lower down the intensity is going to be, which is going to be Ma'ira, that Or Choizer. And Mamela, we see how the Chiddush of Teres HaChasidus, which brings everything up to a higher place, is also part and parcel of the very Chiddush, which allows that light to go lower, to elevate things that could not have been elevated beforehand. That Nimshach al Yedei Kain, that through this, Teisepes Or Yashar, through the aspect of the Or Yashar that comes from a Madrega Gedoyla, Memela Or Choizer Nasa B'Yasser Seis. The Or Choizer is going to emerge upwards once again with more intensity. V'al Yedei Zeh Mitgala Etzem Elikus, and through this, the essence of godliness is going to be revealed. U'Mizgala Shema Yisbarach B'Gilui Gadol, and the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be revealed with more intensity. U'Memela Oila HaOr Choizer Mimata L'Mala B'Soit Shem Taf Tavka. And Memela, the loftier the source of things, when a person starts off at the loftiest place, when they confirm and affirm the ever-present goodness in light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Darga of the Havaya and Elemes, Memela, the Or Yashar is going to go down with more intensity, thereby allowing that Or Choser to dig down deeper, to go down to a place that it could not have gone down to had its source not been as high. And therefore, the higher the source, the more capacity we have to elevate the light that was stuck in the lowest places. And therefore, we see with regards to the Derech HaBal Shem Tov, Mitzad Echad Hu Lamala Lamala Lamala. From one perspective, it's loftier than anything imaginable, like the Rebbe Rashab says, that it goes to a place even higher than the writings of the Arizal. And it engages with the highest lights imaginable, mamish in the Bechina of Rava, the will and the desire that is above thought, that is above Ratzon, that is above all of the emotions. And it's higher than the letters, it's higher than the capacity to express it. But the Balatanya was able to put it into words, especially at the end of his lifetime. This is the aspect of Mesiras Nefesh. This is what the Balatanya went to prison for. But mitzad acher, on the other perspective, not only is it the highest place, but it also goes down to the lowest place, to the place that language doesn't even apply. And through this, it has the capacity of going down to the lowest imaginable place, and because it's rooted in the highest place. The Rebbe says, the light of the Baal Shem Tov, that the Iker is to recognize that in truth, the Torah HaKadosh is mushrash not in a place of Rikia, not in a place of Mayim, but mamish in the place of Or, which is the secret of the Lavas Eish, that intense desire that is inherent and alive within the Torah. And when a person is capable of grabbing hold of that vitality, that fire, that bread of the Torah, and it's specifically when we're masig, that koyach, that deep intensity of Torah Chasidus, that we're able to go down to the lowest place imaginable, thereby elevating the highest level. But like we said, this battle against the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, this engagement with Yaakov Avinu and the Sarah Shel Esav, where there was a pagam in the Hoid and a pagam in the Netzach of Zah, which was correspondent to the Hoid of Nuk, we saw in the Arizal, the Isaba Arizal, Shabi Yesoid Yeshem Kel Adnus, that in Yesoid, the locution of Yesoid, that lowest place that leads down to the lowest place, Olam Asiyah, the shame that's going to be found there is Kel Adnus, Kel Aleph Daled Nun Yud, because we know from the Ari, based on the Zohar Kadosh, that the three olamos of separation are going to correspond to three different shemos. The world of Bria corresponds to Kel Shakai, the world of Yetzira corresponds to Kel Havaya, and the world of Malchus corresponds to Kel Adnus. Because again, Bria is associated with Shakai, which is rooted in Bina, which is the Asoid the Ima, And Havaya is rooted in Zer Anpin, which is the world of Yetzira, and Adnus is rooted in the world of Asiya. And we see in the Arizal that shame of Asiya, of Kel Adnus, that lowest place, is also rooted in the Yesod, in the point of connection, in the Hiskashrus to Tzadikim, in the Hiskashrus to Teres Baal Shem Tov. V'hu Hashem HaMachnia Avodah Zarah. And what the Arizal tells us is that this name of Kel Adnus, which manifests in the lowest place, is also the name that fights against Avodah Zarah. V'inyan ha'hoyed hanapech l'dava. And what is this inyan of the hoid that is nesapech l'dava? What is this inyan of the gratitude that transforms into mourning through the attack of the Sam, through the attack of Sarah Shel Esav? Hu b'bechinas avodah zarah. This sadness, this emergence of sadness, when our gratitude transforms into lack of gratitude, of ungratefulness, of despondency, this is the very aspect of Avodah Zarah. It's not a taitzah of Avodah Zarah, but the sadness itself is Avodah Zarah in the aspect of Atzvus and Marashvaira. That the Pagam of Hod, which the Torah Chasidus comes to save and the light of Hanukkah is coming to elevate, is mamish the klipa of atzvus and marashchayra, of sadness. And like we saw in Tafshin Pei Aleph, what that means is a lack of belief that we have shaykhus to the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. Vua inyan shel gid hanosha. This is the aspect of the gid hanosha, sha'adam shoichich me'amatzil. And the klipa of Avodah Zarah, the atzvon and the marashchayra, is simply when a person forgets about HaKadosh Baruch Hu in their lives. When a person forgets that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there at every moment, v'nasa al yedei kain pegam ha'hoid. And this is what gives birth to the pegam ha'hoid, which we know corresponds to the day of Tisha B'Av, that just like we can't eat on Tisha B'Av, we can't eat the gid hanosha, zakdei arizal, that two correspond to one another. Shehu keneged gid hanasha shu shichacha, that this pegam hahod is the pegam of forgetfulness, which is the klipa of the churban hadas, which is the destruction of my connectivity in my mind to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what happens when I forget HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what happens when I forget the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. She'ein devukim b'das adakei avicha v'avdehu. When we're not connected to the secret of know the God of your fathers and serve him, this is the very birthplace of the sadness and the Avodah Zarah. But corresponding to this dava, this sadness, this marashchayra, this atzvus, we have a shame of kel adnus, this name that is associated with the lowest world, with the world of Asiya. Zak the Rebbe, shesharasha b'tikun rishon dedikna, that this shame of kel is rooted in the first tikkun of the Yud Gimel Tikkunei Didikna, which are the Yud Gimel Tikkunim of Rachamim, which is Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun. The Kel is the birthplace of the beard, and it's also the birthplace and the highest level of those Tikkunim. So we see that this Kel Adnus, this lowly place, is in truth rooted in the highest place. And we're going to see what the Rebbe wants to try and tell us over here, according to humble understanding. Shesharasha b'tikun arishan Didikna, Shesham Mushroshim Kel Shakai, like we said, this shame Kel Adnus is rooted in the loftiest place of the Kel of the Yud Gimel Tikkunei Dikna. So we see again that the lowest place, the Kel Adnus, which has the capacity to fight against Dava and to fight against Avodah Zarah, is in truth rooted in the loftiest place, because like we said, the loftier something is rooted, the lower down it could go. Ubekayach Kel Adnus, and through the strength of this name, Hanimshach me Yesod D'Chura, that emerges from the Yesod of D'Chura, from the masculine Yesod, Kichayra Shayichud Nimshach me Yud Gimel Tikkunei Dikna. So what we come to understand is that the Shirish of the Yichud is in truth rooted in the highest place of the Yud Gimel Tikkunei Dikna. And this kale comes down from the loftiest place down to the lowest place imaginable. And through this, through grasping this lofty light of kale, of the recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's undying great grace and unity at every moment, we have the ability to elevate the hoid, and we have the ability to transform that sadness, that despondency, that atzvus, that marashchayra into a place of gratitude. Because if we don't learn how to rectify hod, if we don't learn how to rectify the nakuda of hod that was nifgam, we can create, God forbid, a void, a vacancy, an empty space, a difference between the hod and the yesod. And if there's a separation between the gratitude and connectivity, chas v'shalom shelo yeh halal hapanui. we can run into the trap of actually creating some sort of a halal hapanui, some sort of vacant space. If we lack gratitude, if we lack joy, if we fall into atzvus and marashleira and shichacha, what we do is we find ourselves in a voided space, in an empty space. Ki koil halal yachol liyos b'kedusha, because in truth, the goal of any void, the goal of any halal, the goal of any emptiness is meant to serve a role in holiness, in the secret of chayim, in the secret of life, which is the same gematria as halal. And what the Rebbe is saying is as follows. There's always going to be a halal. There's always going to be somewhat of an empty space. The danger is if we're not matakein hod, then that empty space is no longer going to be the chayim, which is the gematria of halal, because there's a necessity of a vacant space within holiness as well, which gives birth to the movement through which there is a further revelation and concealment of godliness, a concealment for the sake of a further revelation, because every aspect of the concealment with regards to holiness is part and parcel of the revelation of life itself. Ki im ein rak or beli hachoshech, because if there's only light without darkness, hu kamo koidem habriya. It's like it was before the creation. So we need halal, we need choshech to give birth to movement. And without that choshech, there would be no life that was born out of the paradoxical sway of touching and not touching at the very same moment, of concealment and revelation at the very same moment. That's when halal is transformed into chayim. But when we lack the prerequisite gratitude to recognize that in the heart of darkness there is a simcha atzuma, then we fall, God forbid, into Itzavon and Marashtaira, which is also the birthplace of a halal b'fnei atzma without the chayim that fills it. U'misgaber hachisaron shel halal. And at that point, the vacant space and the emptiness of our lives strengthens itself, and it's transformed, mebechinas hachayim l'chalal hapani, God forbid. That's what happens if we're not matake in the midah of hod. Ubachanukah, but on Chanukah, shenimshach or gadol me'oid me'sheresh hasharashim b'bechinas ha'or shalamala mimayim v'rakia umasigim lavas eish. But when it comes to Chanukah, through the koyach of Yat Kislev, when we draw down the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the highest place in the aspect of or that is above Mayim and Rakia, in the aspect of light that is above the water or the firmament, which is the Shirish of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is the Shem Havaya HaNe'elemes, which is the Akva Abiyah that is higher than the Akva Abiyah that the Arizal spoke about, as the Rebbe Rashab told us. It's specifically there that the Eish is Yoyred Ad Lamata, that it has the ability to go down so far, Va'ayidekain Meir Shem El Adnus, and at that point we have the ability to illuminate that high name that manifests itself in the lowest place, and we have the ability to get rid of the despondency and the sadness. And furthermore, it's the opposite. We transform that dark place into joy, and we create a profound joy. Because when I have faith, that is in and of itself simcha. Simcha and amuna are not two separate inyanim, but rather they're part and parcel of the same experience. And Mela, when I find simcha through that tikkun of hod and running away from the atzvus and the marashleira, as Mamela, I find myself mupusher b'yeser sa'is to that amuna of the Torah Baal Shem Tov. Because by faith I draw down the loftiest level of simcha. Or nasa simcha. Because when I'm zeicha to the Torah on the level of or above mayim and rakia, I have the ability to draw down simcha mehayichud de'elokim chayim from the true unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, machnia kol avodah zarah, and I get rid of all of the avodah zarah in my life, all of the sadness in my life, and I get rid of all the denials and sadness that emerge from the halal hapanu, as Rabbi Nachman says, and at that point we have the ability of transforming the sadness and the despondency into the loftiest place imaginable. And therefore, what the Rebbe is going to say, the souls that appear to simply be like garments, are in truth rooted in the loftiest world of Olam HaMalbush. That, like we saw, the highest and the lowest are interconnected because the higher I go, the lower it can manifest. And these neshamos that appear to be lost, these neshamos that appear to be rooted in those Yud Nitzutze de Kedusha that are Nivla, Betachtas, Akvayim, Da'ak, in that place of Taf Taf Ka that can never be redeemed, in truth, they're rooted in the highest place, B'derech Olam HaMalbush, in that place that the Baal Shem Tov took the Kabbalah of the Arizal and brought it back up to that highest place. It's made like a talis, like the Olam HaMalbush, which is the secret of the YMM, which folds upon itself. It's the mem stuma of the Olam HaMalbush. And then we break open the bottom to reveal the light. So the ois mem becomes like an ois ches, which corresponds to Hanukkah. The Bria Yitzira Nasiya, those are the secrets of the lower worlds. In the aspects of Olam HaMalbush, the Nishamas and Afula Shababiyah, that specifically the loftiest world has the ability of elevating the lowest neshamos imaginable, because like we said, the higher the light, the lower the manifestation of the light, and it has the ability to elevate that which appears to be impossible to elevate. And this is the secret of, and the sun shone for him after the battle between Yaakov and the Sarah Shel Esav, because at that point we're able to be zeichet to the Torah in the aspect of or, above Mayim and Rikia, which is the Torah of believing in a Kadosh Baruch Hu, even when we find ourselves in the deepest place of concealment, which is rooted in the Torah of the Olam HaMalbush, which corresponds to the Osios of Albam, at that place where the Tzirufei Osios of Kale and Lo operate together. And at that point, those Hashpos of that lofty place, of that place of Simcha and the Tikkun of all of the Avodah Zarah, it comes down all the way to the lowest place imaginable. And through that, we have the ability to transform and negate the difficulty in Olam Ha'asiyah. And at that point, we have the ability to transform the Hoid from Dava into Hoid, to transform the Halal and the vacant space into Chayim, to transform the Atzvus and the Marish Torah into a place of Simcha. Hashem Yazor, Sheyetukin, B'Bechinas HaHoid Legamrei. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help that we should be matakin in the Indian of Hoid Legamrei. We're not going to continue a little bit further, but what the Rebbe reiterates over and over further on in this Maamar is that the Chiddush of Hasidus is that it used to be that a person would start from the bottom in order to engage with the battle. And if I start from a place of Bina and separation, then I'm Amud Lipol b'Milchama. If I start off by separation already without rooting myself in the loftiest place imaginable, then I run the risk of falling because I haven't attached myself to that lofty place. So what Torah HaChasidus teaches us is the or of Bittul, is the or of Chachma, like we've seen over and over in these Yad Kislev Maamarim, that when I fix myself to the Yichud Ilah, first and foremost, when I look at the world from the perspective of the Klal, from the perspective of Yichud, and only then do I descend down into a period, at that point, I don't have to be so afraid of the period, because I have affirmed and confirmed my attachment and my Bittul to the loftiest place imaginable. And the Rebbe continues and he says, this was the Chiddush of Chanukah, of the Maccabees, because Maccabee is Gematria 72, which is the Shem Ayin Beis, which is the same that corresponds to Chesed. And what we see with the Maccabees, says the Rebbe, is they went to battle with the Shem of Chesed. And that's a steer, because B'derech Klal we go to battle with the Shem of Membes, which is the same of Gevura. But here we see the Maccabees going to battle with Chochmah as opposed to Bina. But Elamad, this is the Iker Nakuda that we saw from the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. There's a way of fighting the Milchama not by engaging with the battle at the lowly place, but rooting oneself specifically at the highest place. And when you root yourself in the highest place imaginable, at that point you can come down to the lowest place imaginable and be matakin the Atzvus and Marish Torah, and to be matakin everything to the Or Choizer, which is the secret of the Kabbalah and the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, Be'ezras Hashem.
Get that?